What's going on, collectors? This is Uncanny Derek, and in this video, we're going to do something a little bit different. I have an interview with Matthew Therrien, who's a comic book artist, and he has done work on books such as Manboard, and he also has his own created comic book, The Gates of Misery. Full disclosure, I've known Matt for about 10, 12 years, so we are friends. But I just wanted to get his input and understand comic books from his perspective as a comic book artist, dealing with AI art and all the fun stuff involved with that. So stay tuned. So thanks for joining me, Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump onto the channel here. I know you're a busy man with your artwork and all that.
No, well, I'm a fan of the channel. I like the videos you've been putting out.
Oh, you.
I'm a fan of when people talk about stuff they love and when they know about stuff and they're passionate about it, and that definitely comes across in what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And speaking of passion, let's talk about you. This isn't an interview about me, it's
Uh-oh.
about you.
Okay.
So, obviously, you draw. You're an artist. You've done comic books. You do movie posters.
Mhm.
You've run the whole gamut of different artwork. And I guess I just want to start
Mhm.
with your passion for it. How did you get into drawing?
Yeah, so drawing was something that I'd always kind of done as a hobby. I mean, my first career was as a classical pianist. I did that for, up until I was about 25 years old, and that was my full-time job. That was really like music was my passion at that point. But I always loved art and I always loved film. I always loved horror films. I kind of grew up wanting to be like, John Carpenter, like every young boy. And when I was in my mid 20s, I just felt that the music I had taken as far as I wanted to go with it, and I wanted to kind of jump into a different career. My ultimate goal was always to be in film. Like I love film, I love illustration, and I just for whatever reason I thought at the time that maybe the easiest way would be to kind of break in as like a movie poster artist and then meet a bunch of like contacts and directors and producers and then long-term goal would be to make a movie of my own, which not there yet, but um that was kind of how that all sort of started. But obviously I'm a big comic book fan as well. I think I would have loved to have done comics from the very beginning, but as you and I both know, that is a very, very competitive industry, and you don't just start when you're 25 and say, hey, Marvel, I'm gonna work for you now. You have to really build into it. I did a job for Marvel a couple of years ago, and that took what, like 12 years to get to that point. So it's been a ride.
Yeah, and obviously knowing you personally, I know that you have been through a slog of difficult jobs to get where you are now, and that it definitely does
Yeah.
not come easy. And I do remember you showing off your portfolios at various conventions over the years and getting feedback and working on that to get where you are now. And
Hmm.
um, I guess you have shown your portfolio to a few different people, and you have obviously you're a big fan of the medium as well. Who would you say like are your influences in I guess both your posters, non-comic book related things and comic book related things?
I know that's an interesting question because like I feel like I have a million different influences and people that continue to influence me, and you wouldn't necessarily like looking at my artwork and my art style, you it wouldn't jump out at you like, oh, this guy loves Adam Hughes, for example. But I love Adam Hughes. He's, Adam Hughes, Michael Turner, like a lot of these like comic book guys, right,
Right.
are huge inspiration to me. I've been collecting their work for a long, long time. The ones probably that have visually inspired me would be like Alex Ross. Alex Ross, when I found his work, I think one of the first covers I ever saw of his was it was a Spawn cover, and Spawn is holding a child. Have you ever seen that one? Like a young boy, he's kind of protecting him, and the chains are. It looks so real, and for the longest time, like I thought it was a photo, and it wasn't just the realism that inspired me. It was just the fact that you can you can treat comic material with that kind of seriousness and that kind of gravity And that's what inspired me about it. I was like, this isn't somebody who's just sort of churning out pages to hit a deadline or whatever. This is somebody who clearly loves the material and has like made it fine art. Not to say that the other stuff isn't fine art. I just mean like, there's
Alex Ross is at another
Alex Ross
level
is
compared
is
to most
yeah.
comic book artists.
Yeah, I mean just his technical ability alone. I feel like
Yes.
he's doing work that a lot of people are aspiring to, myself included. But like Alex would be a huge one. Bill Sienkiewicz is obviously like for my horror artwork. The I both his comic and his non-comic work. I mean,
Yes.
the fact that he posts a lot of his process, he talks openly about how he creates his pieces, how he'll use house paint, how he'll
Yeah.
use basically whatever he can get his hands on to work with. And that reminds me of a horror guy, Clive Barker, who
Hmm.
created Pinhead and he's
Yeah,
a big
yeah.
painter now. The two of them are very similar in that respect. I mean, I remember watching a video of Clive Barker painting, and he was using a steak knife to just etch away at these paintings to get texture. Anybody who can like kind of think outside the box and just use whatever they have at their disposal is always just like, obviously has influenced my work a great deal. Um, who else? I mean, for
Mike
posters,
Mignola, come on, I can't believe you haven't dropped him yet.
I love Mignola's work. What I love about it is how he can get away with that kind of minimalism,
Yes.
and it still has the drama, and it still has, I mean, him and early Frank Miller, their
Yeah.
understanding of like light and dark, how they could use, literally two colors to just create depth and perspective and all that. It's incredible. And Mike has just like honed it to the next level. I mean, I feel like he can just boom, just make an incredible piece out of nothing.
Yeah, his watercolor work is just breathtaking. And you
Yeah.
dabbled with watercolors too.
Yeah.
No? Yeah.
So when I'm painting a cover, like, and I'm still doing, actually, I'm doing a lot more traditional work right now, just because of, I mean, we can get into it, but because of AI and because of
Yeah.
the direction that art in general has taken and how it's impacting animators, poster artists, comic artists, just every kind of artist across the board. I do a lot of traditional stuff now because that way, A, I can prove I did it, from scratch and I've got a tangible project. And B, I have an extra little thing to sell because over the years, shockingly, and I've listened to interviews with other artists who were working in the 80s and 90s, they were getting paid a lot more decades ago than we get paid now. And I think it's because the
Hmm.
technology makes it easier. I think employers know that it doesn't take 80 hours now to do a movie poster the way it used to.
Sure.
I don't know. The economy of it has changed a lot. So for me, it's always nice, even though I have to turn over the work digitally, I have a little traditional piece that I can sell afterwards.
Yeah, I think about like even that Evil Dead poster behind you. Like if this was the 80s, that whole
Mm.
background would have been painted first or airbrushed first,
Yeah.
and then it would have been painted in layers.
Yeah.
And now it's like I'm in Photoshop, make the gradient happen, and then do your drawing over top of that. So like
Totally.
that's already hours of work just cut out for just doing the background. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The expectation too. I mean, like I've been brought onto jobs where they've had another poster fully created. I mean, it's fully done, but then for whatever reason, a celebrity might not sign off on their likeness, or just there's any number of reasons why this could happen, and then I'll be approached and it's like you have 48 hours to do the entire thing from scratch. If we were still working, like that, like fully traditionally, I mean, the paint wouldn't even be dry on the
Yeah.
canvas, right? Not to mention just how long it takes to do the layout, to do the underpainting, the paint, like it would be crazy. So in that regard, like the technology has really advanced to make my job easier, but by the same token, more people are doing it. So I think the value is coming down.
That's an interesting perspective and also kind of an unfortunate one in
Yeah.
that regard. I mean, because there's obviously so many people who are out there, you can just jump on any social media and see somebody promoting their artwork.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's value still going to the convention and handing your portfolio to somebody,
Yeah.
but it's got to be really tough and competitive to get your face and your name, your artwork in front of everybody else's to at least get where you are. And that kind of brings me to my next question here about how you got started with your first comic book, working on Manboard. How
Mhm.
did that come to be? That was with Steve Kostanski. That was the movie turned comic book.
Yeah, that was fun. So that was really at the very beginning of I had no portfolio at that point. I mean, as you know from what was that, 2012, 2011? It was a while ago.
Yeah.
And it was at the point where I, wanted to delve into that kind of career, and I had kind of cobbled together a few sketches, and I mean, I had no sequential art. I'd never done a comic before. I'd never even done a movie poster before. I really just had like, some watercolors, some life studies, whatever. And I had put all that together, and I went to Fan Expo in Toronto, and I showed it to Steve McNiven, who was doing the portfolio reviews at the time.
Right.
And remember, he looked at it and he was like, "Well, clearly, there's really no comic art here for me to judge." He said, "But your anatomy's good, your perspective's good. I like your style." He's like, "You should pencil more, come back in a year and show me a comic book." Um, while that
Easy
was
as that.
happening, yeah, as easy as that. um, so while that was happening, I had kind of made the realization that jumping into the comic world may not work out right off the bat. And I was living in Toronto. I needed a paycheck, and I really wanted to make art happen. Like I always want to fast track, and
Don't we
obviously
all?
things take time. And as much as I loved comic art, I just thought, well, I'll focus on movie art. So I just watched this movie Manborg that was playing at the Royal, and the director Steve Kostanski, he was there. And it was kind of this love letter to 80s, sci-fi and fantasy and horror movies like Robot Jocks and Mortal Kombat and all those movies that we love.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do a fake movie poster for it. I mean, nobody's asking me for it, but I'll put something together. It'll be a good portfolio piece, and I'll try and build that. And when it was done, I shared it, and Steve reached out and he said he liked it. And I don't remember exactly what the conversation was, but we got talking about comics and how he was a fan of how a lot of movies in the 80s would have comic book sequels. They weren't adaptations of the movie, they were like a continuation of it, but in comic form.
Yeah, absolutely. Godzilla,
And
RoboCop.
totally,
Yeah.
RoboCop's a big one. Yeah, exactly. And so I said to Steve, well, if you ever do it, I have to do like I have to draw it. I had no idea how to draw a comic at that point. I mean, I wasn't working digitally. I was only working traditionally. And it moved forward. We met with the producer. It had a writer. They gave me a script, and I had 1 month. The idea was it would debut at Fan Expo and Anchor Bay. I don't know if Anchor Bay is still a distributor now, but they were Anchor Bay Canada. They were a big one. I think they were bought out. But they had a booth. They were gonna, help sell it along with Raven Banner, the other distributor of the movie. And Steve and I were going to be there all weekend selling these comics. Man, I had no idea what I was in for to make that much art and pencil and ink, and it was a big learning experience. I mean, I look back at it fondly in the sense of I had a really good time working on it. When I look back at the art, I wish I could redo it, now 12 years later, but it was a lot
Hindsight,
of
yeah.
fun. It was a lot of fun, and I learned it was a crash course in everything, hitting a deadline, working with clients. I got to go to a convention out of it. It was something that springboarded the next 12 years of work for me. So
Yeah,
all in
and
all, it was good. It was just, boy, it was a challenge.
yeah, and then from Manborg though, like you ended up self-publishing your own comic book here, The Gates of Misery.
Yeah.
And so look at that, signed by you. You signed it. Wow, that's nice of you. And that like Steve's Kostanski's part like a writer on the
Yeah.
book there, and obviously you have a few other big name writers, Brandon Cronenberg as well. How did you go from Manborg to and going like, man, comic books are difficult, and then we're like, I'm gonna make my own instead and go down the self-publishing route and make my own comic book. Like what out of the stress that you went through Manborg, what made you go, I'm gonna continue doing this?
The funny part is, like with Manborg, luckily I didn't deal with the printing or anything. I just had to deal with the art.
Sure.
And so I had no idea the headache that came with trying to find a printer and actually do the legwork of manufacturing them. But it was it was interesting working on Manborg because, like I said, it had Anchor Bay, it had Raven Banner, it had teams of people looking to promote it and,
Hmm.
bring us to Fan Expo. I had, again, no portfolio. I'd never done anything in the art world. And yet, here for 4 days, I got to go and sign comics, and it felt like such a big deal. And when that was over, it was so anticlimactic because there wasn't another job. There wasn't anybody knocking at my door asking for more work. It was just like, well, what do I do now? I want to keep the
Right.
momentum going. And at that point, I was drawing all the time. Even by the time that I finished Manborg, I had learned a whole bunch of new techniques, and I had purchased a Wacom tablet. I was drawing digitally and teaching myself how to do that. And I just wanted to keep putting out more work. I had this idea. I mean, I grew up on, Tales from the Crypt and Creep Show and Eerie and all those like iconic horror magazines. And I just wanted to do an anthology comic that had that kind of vibe to it. And ultimately, what we wound up with was a weird hodgepodge of, horror and sci-fi. Because at the end of the day, Brandon Cronenberg, Steven Kostanski, John Knotts, they're all very, very different writers and directors.
Yes.
And we had kind of a through line with the cemetery telling the stories and everything, but the stories are all over the map, which I think is kind of fun. It adds to the character of it. But that was really what it was. It was just I wanted to have an intellectual property of my own. I wanted to keep drawing. I wanted to have a deadline. I wanted to like just keep getting my name out there and get back to Fan Expo and hopefully sign more comics and just further my career at that point. And that's going back what, about 11 years, right? For Gates of
Yeah.
Misery.
Yeah. And
But
so,
again, like, yeah.
well, go ahead.
No, yeah, what was I gonna say? And of course it didn't all go exactly according to plan. Originally I had thought that Gates of Misery would be like a monthly issue. I had thought maybe pitch it to Image or Dark
Mhm.
Horse and hope that one of the distributors would pick it up. But by the time I was done and dealing with printing and shipping and all that, because it was crowdfunded as well.
Right.
So once the comic was done, then it was like, trying to find a printer was a big deal, because it's a very like vibrant kind of book. There's a lot of color, a lot of ink, and a
Yeah.
lot of the printers had an issue with keeping the book stapled, because the amount of ink and the amount of like black ink and everything was making the pages brittle. So as you'd flip it, the pages were coming apart. And there were a couple, I had to go through like two or three different printers before I finally found one that could do it. So it was a bit of a headache. And by the time all was said and done, I thought I'm going to move away from comics for a bit, at least the ones that I have to print and deliver, and just
Right.
focus on film posters.
And so, like, you've gone out of comic books at that point, and
Yeah.
it's been a few years since you were in comic books, and now you're back again.
Yeah, and that's
And
really funny, right? Because like my understanding was, well, the way that you break into comics is that you have a portfolio and you go to conventions and you're very boots on the ground and you show your work, and then, they give you sample pages or whatever and you get hired that way, right? Um, but the way that I like, broke into working for Marvel or working for Clover Press or working for like Hex Publishers, who's doing the series I'm on right now, um, it was purely based off of my other work. It was based off of probably like my Instagram or my social media. And that was how like they approached me as opposed to me trying to get that work specifically. So it's very weird. I genuinely I get asked a lot like how do you break in or start your career? I don't think there's one particular way. I think some people do it at conventions, some people are discovered, some people it I don't think there's any dead set path to making it happen.
in the current comic book you're working on, you want to tell the viewers a little bit about that? Like, I know there's a Kickstarter that happened as well, so just delve into a little bit of what you're dealing with at the
Sure,
moment.
sure. So the comic is called True Believers, and it takes place at a horror convention in Colorado. And it's co-written by Stephen Graham Jones, who is a best-selling horror author, whose work you should definitely check out. And they created their own, kind of Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers mascot killer for the series. Um, from what I gather, they've already put out like a first season of comics, so I'm on part two. So I do all the variant covers. So because it takes place at a convention, there's all of these, celebrity guests in the comic, and they've actually licensed their likenesses to appear. So Jamie Lee Curtis, Devon Sawa, R.L. Stine, Matthew Heafy, the guitarist for Trivium. Um, and there's a couple other big ones I don't think that have been released yet. But it's been really cool because like I get to paint these covers for this horror comic. So it's in the world of horror, it's in the world of comics, and it's working with like when would I ever work with Jamie Lee Curtis? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it,
Yeah.
it would be very odd that I would ever have the chance. So it's been pretty cool. It's been a lot of fun, and that was another one where I did originals for the covers, and they already sold off the Kickstarter campaign, and it's been fun to see the reaction to it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the Kickstarter is over now.
Yeah, they went above and beyond. I think they had funded their goal in the first hour or two, and then they
Beautiful.
went yeah.
Right.
So I mean
So
that side of it is not, it has nothing to do with me, but yeah, I'm just the cover guy.
no, but like being able to, obviously have that type of credentials to have those names associated to you.
Mhm.
And like I remember you showing me that Jamie Lee Curtis did share your drawing. Like that
Yeah.
is, although it may not be like, oh, I'm gonna hit up Matthew Therrien right away, like that is still a big thing that you can say you did. Like that.
Totally. Even just because I'm a fan of Halloween and her
Yeah.
work, and I, in my spare time, I'm drawing Halloween posters. So it's like it's not the first time I've drawn her, right? But this is the first time I've drawn her, first or whatever, first time, in a very like official licensed capacity that she is then sharing, and she's backing and being like, look at that. So that was very cool. It was a lot of fun.
So that brings me also to like you're working with your idols, so to speak. My question is, what is your comic book dream team? Like, if you could work with certain type of people, or if there's a certain type of
Mhm.
product you'd love to jump on. Like, is there a DC or Marvel title that you would love to draw? And if so, who do you want associated with your work?
Wow, that
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I would love to work again for Marvel, but I'd love to do covers for either Marvel or DC. I mean, as much as I love sequential art, it's a big commitment.
Mhm.
I have a couple creator-owned comics that I'm working on right now that I won't talk too much about. One is a horror, one is kind of a science fiction horror blend. And it's been fun going back to interior pages, but it's fun because I don't have a deadline on it. I can kind of chip away on my
Sure.
own. Covers are a bit, they're more what I can handle right now. Each cover takes about, 3 or 4 days to do. And I like it because I can work on a number of projects per month, right? So I can get through like 5 covers in a month, and they pay well. And plus you want it, like I always wanted to be a cover artist, right? I always wanted to have my work to go into a comic shop and boom, see it on the front and not have to, flip the pages to see it. Um, but by the same token, I almost feel like when you've illustrated the interiors of a book, you're putting more work into it. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like
100%.
you feel like you've accomplished something even bigger. So there's pros and cons to both, right? I mean, I've got 2 kids, that is a full-time commitment. And to fit in work, I think I would be pulling out my hair if I was doing interiors, right? Being able to sit down and put 3 or 4 hours here and there into a cover works out a little bit better for me.
Again, thank you for taking time for this interview, Matthew.
He's asleep right now. Just don't talk too loudly.
So there isn't anything in particular you want to draw. There isn't like you want to do Superman or X-Men or anything like that.
I would love to. Okay. I would love to work on Batman. Batman
Sure.
has
Yeah.
always been like dream. I would love to work on Zatanna. If
Hmm.
they ever, did like a brand new Zatanna one-off or something, I would love to work, like I love that character. And then for Marvel, I'd love to do like a Scarlet Spider cover. Love Scarlet
Okay.
Spider, love the Ben Riley stuff. Or Hmm. I don't know. Let me think on it.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
good.
It's funny because like I feel like the natural thing would be, oh, put me on a horror book, put me on like Man Thing or even the Hulk or something like that, right? Something where I could draw something horrific,
Darker, yeah.
darker. But to be fair, when it comes to comic stuff, I really do love like using vibrant colors. And I mean, I just put up a Miles Morales picture yesterday
Yes,
because
yeah.
I've got Niagara Falls Comic Con next month, and a lot of my work is horror based, right? So I'm just trying to get a little bit more comic work just to kind of help bridge the gap of, so my table's not just like Freddy Krueger and stuff.
Yeah, and, you've touched upon it about working with Marvel. For those who have not seen your work with Marvel, what did you do with Marvel?
Yeah, I did what was it, about 35 hand painted collectible cards. So they were all originals. They weren't duplicated or anything. Basically, Marvel sent me all the boards. I painted them and then they shipped them off. And then I think they're part of their, what is it? It's the Marvel Masterpiece line. It was one of their card series that was coming out. I
Yeah,
think it's coming out in the fall.
yeah. So
But yeah, that was a challenging process. Because obviously everything was painted. They have a lot of rules and regulations on how characters are portrayed and who you can, for example, you can draw anybody from the X-Men, but you can't draw Gambit. My understanding is because of the fact that Jim Lee created Gambit, correct?
he co-created, like he was on the
Co-created with, yeah.
yeah with
So
Claremont.
I think that there are particular characters like Omega Red,
Yeah,
Gambit, a few of them that you can't include in projects like that. Like they're sort of
sure,
off limits, right? Howard the Duck is kind of an interesting one. You can draw Howard the Duck, but there's like a page of like things you have to keep in mind if you're drawing Howard the Duck. For example, his tie has to be like perfectly cinched up to his neck. He can't have a loose tie. That's not part of the Howard the Duck brand.
right.
So it's just, yeah, random things like that. But yeah, the art boards that they provide you to work on, they're very small and they eat water and water-based paint like crazy. Um, if I could do it again, I would probably like gesso each card first and then do them
Sure.
in acrylic. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend
In
doing that anymore.
hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just really had one other question for you. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned the Niagara Falls Comic Con. What else do you got coming up for you? Where can people see you next?
Um, it's a good question. I don't know if every convention that I'm at has like announced it yet.
Sure.
I have two conventions coming up in the US in the fall. Those I will post about, but I don't think the official announcement has come up. But I'll be at Niagara Falls Comic Con, Frightmare in the Falls in September or October. October is Frightmare. I believe Hamilton Comic Con and Grimsby, and then a day at Garden City Comic Con, which is local to the Niagara area.
Okay, right on. So
Yeah,
you
so
got a lot of conventions coming up for you.
there's a few. Yeah. Stay tuned. Like as soon as I can talk about them, I'll definitely throw them up on my Instagram or my socials.
Yeah, and I'm just for the viewers, I will have links to all of Matthew's socials in the comment section below. I'll have his website. Your web store is open right now or
It
closed at
is,
the moment?
yeah. I've
Okay,
got some originals and some comic pieces right now and posters and the whole thing.
right on.
Yeah.
So that's all the questions I had here, Matthew. I mean, if you had any questions, you
Any
can
questions
now
for
reverse
you?
the tables and ask me.
Hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time to out of your busy schedule and parenting life to take the time to do this interview with me. I hope that some of the information you provided is very helpful for all the viewers out there because I know getting to the comic book biz not easy, and doing everything that you've done so far, you definitely went the hard road, and it wasn't by choice.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. And if anyone ever has a question, just hit me up on Instagram or email. You'll post all the links, but I'm always happy to answer anything that might be helpful.
And that's the end of the interview. So what did you guys think? Is this something I should be doing more on the channel? Should I be interviewing other collectors, comic book artists, or comic book creators? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and see you guys in the next video.